Hey guys, what's up? James here from Embark, and today we're going to take a look at whether Labour would have done better than the Conservatives with regards to COVID. So I'm a classic liberal. I'm pro small government, economic freedom, political freedom and individual rights. But I'm not going to do a deep dive into my personal politics. I wanted to look at the current political climate in the UK and the sentiment towards Boris Johnson and how he's done as a PM during this COVID period. So the reason being is that I'm seeing a lot of judgment from people on the left with regards to Boris Johnson and how well he's done as PM during the COVID period. And there's a lot of judgment saying that, he's done a terrible job, A, B, and C, for whatever reasons. And their point normally ends with a political one, which is if we were in power, if the left were in power, if Labour is in power, we would have done a better job. We would have smashed COVID, the economy would be fantastic, and the world will be looking at us as a beacon of light and using us as an example for how to deal with COVID in times of international disaster or pandemic. And I get it, it's always the case. When shit hits the fan in one country, whoever's in power, the opposing political party are going to say, we would have done a better job, we should have been in power, this wouldn't have happened if we were here. It's that sort of sentiment. And obviously this is always in hindsight. And it's always the way, regardless of whether it's natural disasters, pandemics, protests, war, whatever it is, the other party would have done a better job. And at any other point in history, there's never really been a way to substantiate these claims and say, you know what, you're right, you would have done a better job because you wouldn't have done A, B or C. Because obviously it's in hindsight, so we're not sure what they would have done. They can always say, oh, we would have done this and this that Boris Johnson got wrong, but who's to say they wouldn't have done the exact same things, fallen into the same traps? You could never really know. But this time it's different because every country has had to deal with and deal with the management of COVID. This is the first time in history where we've seen multiple different countries with varying populations, varying political parties in power at the time deal with one particular thing. So it actually gives us a chance to compare and have a look at which political parties did best, which countries did best, and why. So we could take a look at the USA, for instance. The Democrats have been in power for the majority of this COVID period, but with the difference in how individual states are run and obviously the dramatic difference in population, it's hard to compare that with regards to, compare it to the UK. Or we could take a look at New Zealand, which is currently run by a political party that is left, but it's only 5 million people. The population is only 5 million. So again, it's another tough one to look at and compare. And it also doesn't have the sort of authority and the prestige that the UK has. And I think that does play a part. So next we move on to Canada. Population of 38 million, or roughly 38 million. And it's commonly in the top 30 for countries in sort of international rankings for things like life expectancy, freedom of politics, education, and the degree of personal and economic freedoms. And it's run by Justin Trudeau, who is the leader of the Liberal Party, which is the left-leaning party of Canada, and it's been in power for sort of almost 70 years of the 20th century. So it is their main political party. It's most likely to be in power. So for me, this is a relatively good comparison for England, potentially the UK as well, and potentially we'll be able to take a look at that argument of a left-leaning government managing a sort of similar size, the best sort of size comparison of the UK that we're going to find in the world, and the same in terms of their stature in the world, their place in the world. So it's kind of a good comparison, and we can see how well a left-leaning government would have done in this scenario, in the scenario of management of COVID and everything that's come with that. And it hasn't really gone well for Canada, realistically. That's my personal opinion, and I'll tell you why. So it started off with quite a strong stance. He was very much pro-vaccines, which is absolutely fine. I believe you should be pro-vaccine, but he was also pro-mandate, which is the main issue that Canadians have had with the administration during this period of time. And he got a massive deal with Pfizer. I'll put a clip up for you to see, but you know, he's got millions and millions of doses lined up for the next couple of years for the whole country.
We've reached an agreement with Pfizer for 35 million booster doses for next year and 30 million in the year after.
And then he came out and said this, that if you didn't get your vaccinations or your booster, then this is his thoughts on it.
Gens qui sont farouchement opposés à la vaccination,
Qui sont extrémistes.
qui croient pas dans la science, qui sont souvent misogynes, souvent racistes.
And these additional boosters over the next few years were completely unnecessary with regards to the data that we had on it. But with such a pro-mandate sentiment towards these vaccines, obviously this information was suppressed. And Trudeau started to implement more and more restrictions and more mandate, and he brought in laws that allowed companies to terminate people's jobs if they didn't comply. This is not choosing what to put in your body. This is full-on mandate, coercion. If you don't do it, we will take your livelihood away. So obviously this upset a few people in Canada. And then around mid-January 2022, truckers who were not at all pleased with these mandates decided enough is enough, and they started a convoy miles and miles across Canada towards Ottawa to go to Parliament Hill, go direct to the source and say, what's going on, government? You need to change this. So originally, these truckers were allowed to cross the border, Canada and America, and there was mandates put in place, but then they did a 6-month extension where there was no mandates. They realised they needed this supply chain, they needed these transport links going across the border of America to Canada. So they said, nah, don't need no mandates, you don't need vaccines, you don't need any of that. Carry on working as normal. And then this 6-month period, this grace period, came to an end. And this is why they started the protest that you may or may not have seen on the news at the moment in Ottawa, in the capital, in Parliament Hill. And at the same time, we saw this global shift towards their plight. Mainstream news channels started to sort of actually report on the science that everyone else had been seeing for the past year. Nearly simultaneously, the mainstream media reported that masks didn't work. Jabs were not effective after 4 to 6 weeks. Whilst being double vaccinated and boosted, you could still catch COVID. You could still pass it to others and get seriously ill. And they claim that the science has changed. That's what we kept seeing. The science has changed. And it's not the case. It was just they'd earned all their millions from sponsoring Pfizer and were happy to change their narrative because they couldn't hide from the hundreds of millions of people around the world that were spreading the truth. You know, every single news channel in America was sponsored by Pfizer. Pfizer was paying them. Moderna were paying them to get these vaccines in front of your face as soon as you switch on the telly. That's what they were doing.
Nightline, brought to you by Pfizer. Making a difference. Brought to you by Pfizer.
CNN Tonight. Brought to you by Pfizer. Early Start. Brought to you by Pfizer. Friday night on Aaron Burnett Out Front. Brought to you by Pfizer.
This Week with George Stephanopoulos is brought to you by Pfizer.
This weather report brought to you by Pfizer.
Today's countdown to the royal wedding is brought to you by Pfizer.
And now a CBS Sports Update brought to you by Pfizer.
Meet the Press Data Download. Brought to you by Pfizer.
This portion of CBS This Morning sponsored by Pfizer.
On how to find the hidden sugars in the American family diet. Sponsored by Pfizer.
So now we come back to the truckers who on January 22nd formed this massive convoy made up of hundreds of vehicles, and they all headed for Ottawa to confront the government, and they made it to Parliament Hill on the 29th of January. Since this point, things have escalated a little bit. There was quite a few citizens who agreed with the truckers and, are anti-mandate, they're pro-vaccine but anti-mandate, and they were helping the truckers. They were bringing them food, they were bringing them fuel for their trucks, and they were there with them in the community, adding their voices to the truckers, the voices that they wanted to hear, they wanted the government to hear. And Trudeau just escalated things more and more. Firstly, he went onto the TV and said this.
The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing.
Then he started exercising more power from the government, and he said, if you are found to be helping the truckers, you are going to be arrested. So no more food is going to them, no more fuel is going to them. We're not going to let you do it. We will arrest you if you try and help them. Then GoFundMe removed the fundraising campaign that had amassed over $10 million for the trucker convoy protest. Then finally, on February the 14th, Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act. This gave banks the ability to freeze the accounts of anyone who law enforcement believed to be involved in the protest. I'll be clear again. This allows banks to freeze the bank accounts of those who police and law enforcement believe to be involved. Not involved, believe to be involved. No questions asked, no court to hear your side of the story. Just if they think you're involved, they will take all your money, freeze your bank account. This Emergencies Act is supposed to be used for national emergencies, international emergencies, disasters, wars. It's not supposed to be used for a small protest, localised, that the PM has escalated. And this is where the irony comes in, because Justin Trudeau has reacted to protests about government overreach by then escalating to the highest level of government overreach possible. And it's not just Canada. Mandates, COVID passports, restrictions, they are in multiple different countries all around the world. And it's all based in science that has since changed. So if you think Labour would have done a better job in the UK, you might be right. And I'm not saying that Boris Johnson has done a good job. I absolutely disagree with well over half of the things that this government has done, this administration has done. But if you believe that Labour or a different administration would have done a better job, then all you need to do is look around the world and you'll see how poorly everyone's done, and you'll realise it's not the case. That's it from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We've got new videos coming out every single week. I've been James from Embark, and as always, I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.